a political analyst and filmmaker, and he joins us from London. Sukan Shandan, if we were to look at what is going on regarding Syria, please give us your input on this, how you see the overall picture, because we're looking at an opposition that it appears to be in disarray. We're looking at this Friends of Syria meeting to be held in Istanbul, but at this point, the diplomatic front doesn't seem to be anywhere close to what these countries that are so obsessed with regime change actually want.
No, quite right, and good evening, brother, and to all your viewers. I think it's quite an interesting situation now that we found in Syria, because I think that really the Syrian Ba'athist government and army has shown it can withstand this international imperialist conspiracy, albeit imperialist allied with their proxies on the ground. They can withstand the devastation, they can withstand the trauma that the Syrian National Army has remained unified and cohesive in the face of a vicious sectarian onslaught by the death squad supported by the imperialist powers. And this being the case, even the imperialist powers, at least in their rhetoric, and we know we cannot trust their rhetoric much anyway, but at least even in the political rhetoric in Geneva in 2012, there was an admission that all parties in the Syrian conflict have to be involved in resolving the conflict there. Nevertheless, I think the crucial phrase to understand what's going on in Syria actually is the United States administration admitting its pivot to Asia. And then while Britain and France particularly, and we had an opinion piece in the New York Times just a few days ago, still really trying to lobby the United States to use its military muscle to implement a no-fly zone in Syria, actually the United States is quite disinterested in that. And why is it disinterested in that? Not only because there's a strategic pivot to Asia, in their own words, but actually things in the Middle East, North African region are going to plan for imperialism, i.e. that they do not have to intervene directly militarily, and that brown-skinned sellouts or coconuts or Uncle Toms, whatever you want to call them, unfortunately the people within the region who are collaborating with imperialism are delivering for imperialism its strategic interests in the region generally and Syria specifically, as we're discussing.
Very well. Obviously so much more to talk about. I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much. It's good to see you. Sukan Shandan, political analyst and filmmaker there from London. Thanks.
To Mr. Webster Griffin Tarpley, who's an author and historian, who's joining us live now via Skype from Washington. Mr. Tarpley, I wanted to get your reaction to a lot of what President Assad said, this warning that he gave to the West about his support for Al-Qaeda in Syria.
Well, we're confronted with this colossal irony. The United States claimed that the reason for invading Afghanistan in 2001, and then really the reason for invading Iraq in 2003, had something to do with denying sanctuary to Al-Qaeda terrorists. And that was the basis in propaganda and political argument for these attacks. Now we fast forward to the present day, and we see that the United States, as a matter of policy, is positively committed to bringing first Libya and now Syria as well under the control of terrorist gangs, death squads, which we can only describe, which the State Department itself describes as satellites, branches of Al-Qaeda terrorism. So we've now got the perspective of the Mediterranean becoming a terrorist lake between the terrorist bases in Libya, which are spreading out across the Sahara into Algeria, into Mali, into other nearby countries, and then the future terrorist regime that NATO and the United States are devoted to installing in Syria, from which, of course, then Al-Qaeda will reach out into Turkey and Jordan and these other countries that were mentioned. So this is one of the most colossal hypocrisies of the age, and it also shows the absolute fanatical recklessness of the U.S. ruling class, because this is something that you can't get away with. It's just, it's beyond all belief. It also, it has something to do with the individual politicians. we're now in the second term of Obama. Well, what happens in second terms? Well, from Watergate with Nixon to Bill Clinton some years back, this is the time when U.S. administrations come under attacks, when there are scandals, when impeachment or something like this becomes a possibility. And you can see the path that would lead towards impeachment for somebody like Obama or Senator Kerry or other of these top officials, that they have a foreign policy which relies on Al-Qaeda as a kind of irregular auxiliary force, a kind of irregular infantry when they attack these countries. They don't do it in the same way that Bush and Cheney did it with official U.S. divisions, although we may be getting to that for Syria. That's the news from today. But what it has been up to now is using Al-Qaeda as an irregular opposition force. So both from the point of view of these terrorist sanctuaries and safe havens, and from the point of view of what it will mean individually to these politicians, it's full of terrifying potential for the near future.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for now, but of course, as always, we do appreciate your insight. That was Mr. Webster Griffin Tarpley speaking to us live from Washington. We're joined by Mr. Jim Brand, who is with the Stop the War Coalition, who's joining us now on the line from London. Mr. Brand, thanks a lot for joining us now. How do you react to the fact that now we have the fact that we now have these 200 American troops, entering Jordan? What exactly is the United States planning at this point?
Well, I think first of all, we shouldn't be surprised, because there have been so many indications in the last couple of years that to have some specific confirmation like these 200 troops is nothing more than confirming what we effectively knew already. Because you have to present the thing, I think, in its most basic context, which is that what the United States has in the world today, indisputably, is military power. And the constant question for the United States is to bring that military power to bear. And they've had some real setbacks because, they thought they were going to march into Iraq 10 years ago and they were going to be greeted with flowers and sweets, as they said. And we know that 9 years later they disappeared basically with their tail between their legs. But that is a constant factor, that they have to bring that military power to bear. And that region of the world where Syria is absolutely vital region, the most vital region, you could say, for them to do that. So that shouldn't surprise us. On the other hand, they have a problem that they cannot work out effectively exactly how to do it. And that's really how things have been for 2 years now. Although you have to say that they have made constant efforts, and they're always making constant efforts, and I can speak more clearly about Britain because Britain is very closely allied to the United States. And if you look at the series of announcements made by the British government, they are more and more deceptive because clearly Britain is introducing military aid of various kinds into the situation, while at the same time pretending that it isn't. So it calls what it supplies, for example, defensive. So it supplies armored vehicles, which it then says are defensive and not offensive and so on. But it's all very deceptive. And the constant position that they are taking is to militarize the situation and to try and intervene militarily, either directly or by proxy.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for now, but of course we do appreciate your insight. That was Mr. Jim Brand speaking to us live from London.
Passes a resolution to help Tel Aviv in case of an Israeli attack on Iran. Resolution 65 has been approved by the Senate's Foreign Relations Committee. It states that the U.S. will assist Israel diplomatically, economically, and militarily if it takes military action against Iran. The powerful pro-Israeli lobby AIPAC has urged the full Senate to act fast to adopt the resolution. The resolution comes a day after Israel threatened to attack Iran. Israel's Chief of Staff Benny Gantz says Tel Aviv is capable of attacking Iran without foreign support. Gantz says Tel Aviv has its own plans and forecasts and will take the decision to wage a war against Iran on its own. Iran has repeatedly pledged to give a crushing response to any attack on its soil. Well, to discuss that story more, we're now joined by international lawyer Mr. Franklin Lamb, who's joining us from the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Mr. Lamb, welcome to the program. Now, if memory serves me correct, the U.S. administration has time and again stated that it does not support an Israeli strike on Iran. Now, if the full Senate does pass this recent proposal, don't you think that there's a hint of inconsistency there?
Well, and unrealism on behalf of AIPAC when they announced after the passage before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee only of Senate Resolution 65. It's got a long way before it gets supported by the Congress, and it is not supported by the White House. This is contrary to articulated American policy. What it is just more of the hype. It is now that there have been 69 pro-Zionist resolutions coming out of one of the committee or the other of the U.S. Congress. 69 in the past 6 years. So this is a throwaway. The only reason it's significant, and we're talking about it, is that it comes as part of a coordinated effort between AIPAC, the Zionist lobby in the U.S., and the Zionist occupiers of Palestine, guys like Gantz. So they try to coordinate it. They want to create in the image of the public in Israel and America and around the world that there's this NATO-type alliance and devotion. Well, we could discuss the devotion another time, but the fact is this will not have the effect of Article 5 of the NATO Charter. It will not be a requirement that the Americans back up an aggression. Remember, the NATO is an attack on one, is an attack on all, not an aggression. So I don't put much into it. The only way I see it as being dangerous at all right now is the current context. Look, Israel is being eclipsed. The government isn't much. More and more opposition, resistance around the world. I'm not talking just about Iran growing stronger and Israel growing weaker every week, or Hezbollah. None of that. I'm talking about BDS. The boycott and the disinvestiture and the sanctions on American campuses, and the rising up with the economic problems, the realization that we can no longer afford American taxpayers $8.2 million every day of the year. So faced with that swing of the pendulum, and that history is increasingly rejecting this last 19th century colonial enterprise, Zionist occupation of Palestine, they're in a tough spot. Israel's in a tough spot. Korea's taking the attention. Their project in Syria is not working. The opposition isn't what they hoped for. Bashar Assad is likely going to remain, or at least the regime's going to remain. So it's a dangerous period. It's a dangerous period because Israel, I don't think they'll make good on these threats. But when they get into this corner, they tend to strike out. So that's, sorry to go on, but that's the context in which I would see Senate Foreign Relations Committee Resolution 65. Not more than that.
All right, thank you very much, international lawyer Mr. Franklin Lamb from the Lebanese capital, Beirut.